Thank you, Milton. All right. Welcome, microeconomic students. I hope everybody's doing great today. This is our continuation. We're going to touch on a few items that we left out in the other video. And so, but it will be important for you to know this, and you're going to need to remember at least a few of these items. All right? Okay. So, what we're talking about today, we're going to be talking basically again monopolistic competition and oligopoly, and we're going to use a monopolist as an example, or a great example of price discrimination. Now, price discrimination was an entire chapter, so what is it? Basically, price discrimination, we have a producer, typically a monopolist, because he is a price, or she is a price maker, all right? And what they do is they charge a different price to different types of consumers, okay? For the exact same good or service. So the good or service has not changed. It's the same good or service, but they're charging different prices for it, okay? To different consumers. All right, there's a few things that have to be present that you probably read about. First of all, we have to have a price maker. Second of all, we have to have different types of consumers. And third, there was no resale. You can't go out in the market and resell what you bought, okay? Now, just when we did that exercise with consumer and producer surplus, okay? We remember that consumer surplus was the top triangle, producer surplus was the bottom triangle, right? All right, well, let's look at this example. They assume, we take the assumption that marginal cost in this example is constant. It's just easier to show. So they draw a constant marginal cost. And we have a monopolist. So in general, what does a monopolist do? Cuts back on production, makes less quantity, basically rule of thumb to do what? To charge a higher price, okay? All right. And so this is a real simplified diagram or graph. What we're showing is, all right, we have a monopolist, boom, we got the demand and marginal revenue curves. Starts at where marginal revenue, because marginal cost brings it up to the demand curve and over. So just in our simplified version for today, we're saying, all right, so this typically was, with perfect competition, consumer surplus. But here, with the monopolist, he takes over this much, and that's the profit for the monopolist. We also see, with this one price that a monopolist throws out, we have our black wedge, or our black triangle, which is dead weight loss. And we know with dead weight loss, classic inefficiency, we talk about nobody gets it. Nobody gets it, so they call it dead weight loss. And our consumer surplus is kind of squeezed up into this top little triangle, all right? So that would be the situation if we had one monopolist charging one price for an exact same good. But what if he could, or she could charge more than one price? For classic examples are the airlines. You know that students typically have more time, they're more flexible. If they were taking a trip to California to visit some friends, but it was summer and they didn't really have to leave on Thursday, they could leave on Friday. They're more flexible. They don't really need to be on a specific flight at a specific day or time. Business traveler, if you have to be in San Diego for a business meeting Friday morning, you have to get the late Thursday afternoon flight out. So you're fairly stuck. So they will charge a business man or a businesswoman more for the ticket than they would a student. A student is more flexible, doesn't fly out on Thursday, can fly out on Friday. So that would be an example of having two different prices. And what I've done is I just kind of filled in all the boxes. This is an example of what we have when a monopolist, if a monopolist could go and find out what every single different type of consumer was willing to pay, he could or she could go across and take advantage of, not only would they have this box, but they would hit every single consumer all the way up, and they would take over the entire triangle, all right? So, what does that mean? Well, it means that there is no more consumer surplus. The entire consumer surplus is now going to be handed over to the producer. Now, is this market perfect? Well, some students might say, well, it doesn't sound very perfect to me. There's no more consumer surplus. But economically speaking, this does maximize the efficiency. For instance, there is no longer any dead weight loss, all right? And total welfare, I mean, this whole triangle now will go to the producer. So it maximizes efficiency, and from your text, it'll also tell us that it maximizes total welfare. All right? So that's what it does. We just, and again, what we do is, if they could charge just one price, it would be this. If they could charge two prices, or three or four, they keep taking advantage of different types of consumers, and the more types of consumers that they can take advantage of, the more their boxes they're filling in. And not just filling in one or two boxes, and then this is dead weight loss. That would be two prices here and here. But they are filling in the entire triangle, all right? So we've got the entire triangle is filled in, but economically speaking, you are maximizing your efficiency and you're maximizing your total welfare, all right? Again, who does it? Airlines, they do it. Restaurants, do restaurants do it? Well, they have early bird specials for when I get a little older, and I'm old, I would probably go to an early dinner. You know, is that price discrimination? Well, yeah, sure it is. Because if you and your friends went later on in the evening, you're gonna be paying more. So restaurants do it. Movie theaters do it. State schools. Do we charge more for students who come out of state if they wanted to go to, let's say, Michigan State or U of M? Yeah, sure, we charge a lot more. My oldest daughter she was thinking of going to Syracuse or Michigan State, and we got this was many years ago, but we got what the tuition would be for Syracuse, and for any out-of-state students, they ratchet up the tuition unbelievable. So that's a form of price discrimination. And hotels, do hotels do it? Well, sure. There's Priceline, there's Hotel.com, there's Hotels, Trivago, all different price. Their ads are showing you those couples, and one paid one price, one paid another. It's exact same good, they're paying a different price. That's price discrimination. Okay? All right. So, we're going to move on now to advertising. Is advertising important? Yes, typically now our text brought it in under monopolistic competition, but don't kid yourself. Advertising is a big deal for both monopolistic competition and oligopoly. Basically because, you can split hairs and say, well, monopolistic competition is a differentiated good and oligopoly is a similar good. Let's face it, they're all trying to make their product a little different, okay? And what do? They do it through advertising. The big three, and I think we mentioned in the previous video, they do it all the time with their cars, with their trucks, and basically it's a truck. Same thing with monopolistic competition, maybe a little bit different because it's a difference between Asian food or a hamburger or pizza. Maybe the distinction is a little clearer, but after all, the underlying fact is it is all just food. So both monopolistic competitors and oligopoly, they both will use advertising, okay? They're trying to make their product different. And does it work? It works in varying degrees. A lot of times it must work fairly often in this country because we do a lot more advertising than the rest of the world. All right? Now, if it is successful, we know, all right, it's going to raise the cost of doing business, and who eventually pays the cost? Well, you and I pay the cost because it got to build it into the price. So advertising will result in higher costs, okay, and higher prices. But it very likely will result in greater demand for the product. And if advertising is really successful, your product will become a brand name. Now, brand name such as Xerox, okay? Xerox, Kleenex, Mason jars, Jell-O. I mean, years ago when it's not so prevalent now, but back in the 60s or early 70s, if you were in a big business meeting, you might say to someone, would you please Xerox this for me? Now, do you mean that you want them to run out office to office and find a Xerox machine? No, you just meant make a copy of this. But it became such a brand name that people just associated Xerox with having a copy being made. Same thing with Kleenex, especially now with what we're going through. Oftentimes, if you have to blow your nose, you may say, okay, you're not going to say, may I borrow a soft facial tissue? Typically, you'll say, hey, can I borrow a Kleenex? Because it's a brand name. Mason jars are the same thing. There's lots of Mason jars. But the original company, started by John Mason in 1858, they brought out their product and it became just a household name, a brand name. And Jell-O. Every time you have a gelatin dessert, doesn't necessarily mean it was from the Jell-O company, but it's a brand name, okay? So brand names are important. If you can establish your product as a brand name, you have a tremendous advantage. So advertising, yes, can help. Increases your demand for your product, will increase your profit margins. The other side of the coin, does it cost money? Yeah, it does cost money. So it's going to increase your costs, increase your price is going to have to go up. Okay, as a matter of fact, I think one of the examples we had was, should you advertise? If you had two firms, do you advertise? Do you not advertise? But we'll get into that in just a minute, okay? Now, oligopoly. Unlike monopolistic competition, which has a huge, not huge, but a very large number of producers, and easy entry and easy exit. This is monopolistic competition. oligopoly, again, just has a handful of producers and very high barriers to entry or exit. And again, with monopolistic competition, and especially when they use food as an example, some economists would argue the fact that there's not necessarily easy exit. I had an old friend of our family's had a company that they supplied restaurants with custom-built equipment. And one day I happened to go through their warehouse, and there was all sorts of stainless steel equipment, washers and cabinets and all this equipment. And I said, what is it? It was from all the restaurants that went bankrupt. And once they went bankrupt, that custom-built automated dishwasher, can you readily turn it around and sell it and get most of your money back? No, there's no way in heck you're going to get most of it. You're not even going to get a fraction. You'll be lucky to get 10, 15 cents on the dollar. And you spent a lot of money. So when they say there's easy exit in that particular industry, a lot of economists would argue with that. And you think about all the custom-built equipment that a restaurant needs, you might think twice before you say, oh yeah, it's easy exit. It's a painful exit. The exit strategy is very painful and very costly. All right, but we'll save that for another video. Anyway, oligopolist, similar product. They want to differentiate it. Will they advertise? You bet they'll advertise. They'll advertise like mad. All right, because they need to differentiate. We talk about the 4-firm concentration ratio. Governments are always interested, and I gave you the HHI index on, is one firm getting too big in the market, or are 2 or 3 firms, are they taking control of the market? Because what the government wants to do is they want to make sure that this oligopoly does not start to become a monopoly, okay? And if there's 4 firms, but one is huge, and then we've got some smaller and smaller ones, it tends to act like monopoly. Years ago, Brazil had a tremendous amount of the market for coffee, and a lot of the other countries didn't come close. That market share would have been considered too large. Okay. Anyway, the government tries to keep it so that there's a number of that handful of firms. They're all fairly equal. Big 3 now. Well, the big 3 and all the other worldwide corporations from Germany, from Italy, certainly from Japan, Korea. None of them have a huge portion. When I mean by huge, I mean they don't have 50% of the market. Where years ago, before we had all the influx of these foreign cars, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, and then little American Motors, they had quite a large segment of it. Anyway, okay, so an oligopoly, they don't want the oligopolists to act like a monopoly. In other words, they don't want to get together, and when they get together in a small group and they agree on a cooperative course of action, we call that collusion, all right? And what's that cooperative course of action? Well, exactly what a monopolist does. Limit production and raise the price. Okay, classic example of an oligopoly that is got tremendous agreements is OPEC. And when we get an oligopoly such as OPEC, that colludes, well, they collude overtly. They couldn't do it in this country because it's illegal. But when they do collude, we call that type of oligopoly a cartel, okay? Anyway, there's overt collusion, which is, we talked about this a little bit last time, right out in the open. Covert, you're doing it in secret. And then tacit, which, if you recall from the graph, and I showed you what it kinked demand curve was, and the marginal revenue curve had that dotted line. Basically, that is the tacit agreement in terms of what they're going to make, and typically their pricing structure. It's not an official agreement, it's more or less just an understanding. They understand the market, so they're all just kind of reaching a consensus without getting together in a overt or covert meeting, but just because they understand the market, they realize what quantity to make and where the pricing should be, okay? And remember, a price leader in that group, in an oligopoly, if we have one company who's a price leader and brings the price up, the other companies are going to sit back and see, hey, is that price increase going to take? And they won't raise their price. But if the price leader lowers the price, the others will follow suit in order not to lose market share. Okay? All right, that brings us to game theory, which I'm really sorry that we were unable to do. We had some great game theory games. Game theory basically is just we're looking at how these firms, and remember, one of the most important parts of oligopoly is mutual interdependence, okay? Because there is only a handful, they're always looking at what the other person is doing. So there's this mutual interlock, this mutual interdependence, okay? And what we're doing is, with game theory, we look at how firms and individuals, how they act since they are interdependent. Sometimes there's a dominant strategy. That just means you are going to take this course of action regardless what the other two or three oligopolists are going to do. Sometimes we can reach a Nash equilibrium, also called a non-cooperative equilibrium. Okay, each player you're trying to maximize their payoffs, not considering how their actions would affect the other players in the market. Okay, but in the long run, and we would have seen that from our game. In the long run, cooperation actually is generally the better way to go in the long run. The first of the game theory games, and game theory, why is it important? It cuts clear across economics. It cuts everything from bankruptcy law, it cuts into negotiation, foreign trade negotiations. It cuts clear across our economy. So game theory is much more than just an add-on to a chapter. It is very important. It cuts across our market. All right, first game theory typically is called the prisoner's dilemma. I hope you can see it. Let me move this a little closer and see if we did this. Okay, here we've got you as player one and your pal as player two. You are green and you would be the first number in the parentheses. Your friend would be the second number. All right, so you were robbing a bank, or let's say you're robbing a bank. And they caught you and your friend. They caught you on tape carrying a concealed weapon. And they got you on that charge, all right? But they really want to nail you for the bank robbery. And they don't have enough evidence unless one of you confesses. So here's the matrix, how this would work out. You've got two choices. You can either confess or you don't confess. And your partner has the same options, confess or don't confess. Now, the problem is you're both in separate cells which are at opposite ends of the jail. You don't know what your partner is going to do. So do you confess or do you not? Prosecutor says, hey, look, if you confess and your partner doesn't confess, you're going to go home today. Your partner's going to get 10 years. But if you don't confess and your partner confesses, you're going to get the 10 years. Your partner's going to go home today. If you both confess, you get 6 years. If you both don't confess, they got you on the gun charge and you're going to get 3 years, but that's about all they can do to you. So what is the best course of action? Well, you know, again, this is economics, so it depends. You might think, well, you know, the best thing, my partner's probably going to confess, so I might as well confess. So you might get a lot of, in this game that we play in class, a lot of times you'll get, you know, both confessing. But surprisingly, and this goes contrary to what the book says, surprisingly, over the years, I've got a lot of neither one confesses. So that would be probably one of the best outcomes combined for both parties, okay? Also have a great game we play, and if we ever get back to class, we will play it. Everybody gets 2 cards. You get a red card and you get a black card. You put them down on the desk. And your partner gets a red and a black card. If you play the red card, you get 2 points or $2, whatever you want to call it. No matter what happens, you absolutely get $2, all right? But if you don't play the red and you play the black, your partner gets $3. And you don't know, and you don't get anything until you see what your partner plays. Now, if your partner plays black also, then $3 is coming over to you. But if you play a black card and giving your partner $3, and your partner plays a red, saying he wants 2 for himself, then your partner gets 5. Same thing if you play a red and your partner plays a black, he gives you the 3 and you get the 2 from your red. What happens, we don't do this just once. We have several rounds of this. And some students just flat out, their dominant is, I don't care. Red. Doesn't matter. Always red. And what happens basically is the partner of that student will just start playing red too, because there's no point in giving him you know, any black cards for $3. A lot of times what will happen in early stages of the game, students will play a red because they want to get, you know, on the board. They want to get something going for themselves. But as the game progresses, they seem to learn that, hey, you know what? If we both play black, you know, we'll both end up getting $3 or points apiece. And in the long run, this cooperative nature or cooperative action is the most beneficial. Okay? So which is kind of like what we talked about just a minute ago. And then at the very last, the last round, we say, this is it. This is the last round. Majority of the students, they will play a red because they figure there's nothing else to lose. He can't do, or she can't do anything to me. I might as well absolutely guarantee myself of something. Anyway, it's an interesting game, and over the years, it does seem to follow that way, okay? And that's game theory, the shortened version of game theory, okay? All right, well, I think that's about it for today. We will have another video coming out probably Wednesday, and we'll clean up some information and some work on the chapters that we haven't finished up yet. And other than that, I wish everybody you stay safe, stay well, be happy, be optimistic, because better days are coming and things are going to work out. All right? All right. I miss not seeing all of you in class.